Let's talk about Relic Entertainment. Well, sorta, kind of anyways, and yeah, old news, but Relic. I've always been a massive fan of Relic. Always is perhaps stretching the definition of the word a little bit, considering their, track record. I'm a fan of the idea of Relic, okay? And now that Relic Entertainment becomes independent, after having apparently been bought up by some form of investment firm in London, is what I've been able to dig up so far, which is interesting. Now, if I was to just completely speculate here, I would think that Sega, were people who originally owned Relic, who owned Relic last, they picked up Relic on a fire sale after THQ went under, Relic then being a part of THQ. They were in the middle of developing Company of Heroes 2, and they were about to release it like 6 months too early, and probably make it bomb like nothing you've ever seen. Sega swooped in, purchased the then very famous strategy titan of the time, and got COH2 basically for free. And they pushed it back a little bit, released it in a more complete state, and COH2 will forever remain a decent, but nowhere near COH1 level sequel, right? It still got some players today, it's still sorta popular, it was sorta popular at the time, it certainly wasn't a flop like, Dawn of War 3 or anything like that, so it did okay, and Sega probably got its money back fairly easily, I'd imagine. But then Sega started to look at Relic and question their investment, as Dawn of War 3, of course, was the exact opposite of what anyone had ever asked for. And who to lay the blame on for that is an interesting theoretical question which we'll probably never quite know the answer to. Was it Sega moving in after COH2 and maybe pulling some levers, going like you gotta appeal to the wider audience, yada yada yada, and so was the disaster of Dawn of War 3? Or are we going to take Relic at their word? As they mentioned whilst they were developing Dawn of War 3, that this was the game they've always wanted to make. This was what they were truly trying to do, and they thought that all of their decisions would be for the better. I remember talking to a community manager for Company of Heroes years and years ago around this, and the developers seemed to genuinely think this was a good idea. It wasn't. It really wasn't. But they had enough passion to convince people within some of the community and even some of the content creators covering it of it as well. So they must have somehow thought it'd be good, I guess. I mean, I never really bought into it, but yeah. And then, of course, Company of Heroes 3 has probably not been a sales success either. Probably an outright flop, if I'm to be entirely honest, which is a massive shame because Company of Heroes has, of course, been an enormously popular and relatively successful franchise, with COH1 literally revolutionizing the entire RTS genre. It is one of the titans of the industry. But after years of not really being able to replicate that success, Sega cut their ties, and Relic was sold off to someone mysterious, so they don't actually have a publisher now. Now, if I was to speculate, again, I would imagine that probably some old leaders of Relic, or probably maybe even the current CEOs, went to investment firms, went like, hey, listen, we know we can do this, we just need some money to keep this going, we need to get another product out the door, and we are totally going to be back, baby. And you know what? God, I hope so. Jesus, I hope so. Okay. See, I'm a bit of a Sega simp, right? Because by and large, Sega has never really seemingly interfered that much with the companies I have liked or the games I have liked. They've mostly just been a silent partner, going like, okay, we're gonna own you, we're gonna give you some money, and hopefully you're just gonna keep rolling, right? And only when the companies start actively fucking up, do Sega come in and start cracking the whip, as we've seen with Creative Assembly, for example, slicing off a significant quantity of the fat there and finally cancelling Hyenas after it ate God only knows how many millions of pounds of money and developer fat, that is. And going, no, get back to making Total War, you lazy British cuckolds. And God willing, they will. Indeed, the ideal situation here is that both Relic and Creative Assembly will somehow return to form. I'd be very shocked if that happened, but hey, we can hope, can't we? But this, of course, comes and is as a part of a much larger generalistic wave of layoffs. And Embracer Group is one of the interesting ones. So Embracer is a company that I kind of sort of have some optimism for, as they've been picking up a lot of companies, and interestingly enough, unlike a lot of companies, Sega being one of them, who were willing to just take losses for years and years and years, Embracer Group have been very clear that if you don't earn money, they're just gonna sell you off, basically. They mention in this article here at some point, where they basically say, it's not that we don't like these developers, or that we don't necessarily have plans for them, but they've been a negative cash flow influence on us, and if it doesn't earn money, we're just not interested, and we're gonna throw it straight out the door, which is why they also murdered Volition, and part of me is sad about that, because it's Volition, it's free space, goddamn. They used to be so good. But at the same time, I've also gotta realize that the Volition that I once knew and loved has been dead for a solid 10 plus years. And its rotten carcass, masquerading under the old logo, wasn't really doing anybody any favors, frankly. And so finally resting a shotgun nice and gently up to the chin of their little faces and pulling both triggers just to make sure was probably a good thing at the end of the day, tragic though it might be. And Embracer Group, well, they've got a fair few massive accusations as well. They're trimming the fat now, and unlike many of the other companies, they started trimming early. Like, one of the reasons Sega is doing this now is like, well, you see, there was the post-COVID slump in Europe, which is damnably interesting, ain't it? Because too many of these companies have been maintaining that COVID was actually a problem for them. Games Workshop does this too. Like, oh, that darn COVID hit. It really damaged our bottom line, even as numbers go up, 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 as people are stuck at home and desperate for entertainment. Thus, many of the corporations that hired loads of people during the boom era that was COVID is now looking back at it and going, we don't need any of you, and firing them by the truckload. Embracer Group was one of the earliest to start doing this because they seem to be a pinch more business savvy than a lot of their competitors, or if not business savvy, then realistic. And with the Lord of the Rings rights, I do believe these are the movie rights, if I remember correctly. I'm relatively... yes. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, which is the movie rights, I'm 98% certain, rather than the actual, Lord of the Rings trilogy stuff, the book stuff, right? The Middle-earth stuff. What is the different name of those? Anyways, you get what I'm saying, right? $395 million. That is a fucking steal for those movie rights, and no doubt about it. Like, the stuff they could potentially do with this is incredible. I mean, hell, the old movie tie-in style games, like War of the Rings, or those third-person action games, which I can never remember the name of, all of that stuff would sell like hotcakes if you simply presented... oh god, now, imagine releasing an old-school third-person, like, just hack-and-slashy game with good addictive third-person combat, lots of combos, killing thousands of orcs, just as Season 2 of the Rings of Power releases. And it's all your old heroes. It's got Gandalf, it's got Aragorn, Boromir, Faramir, Sam, Frodo, all in their recognizable movie appearances. It would sell like nothing you could ever believe. As people are looking at the Rings of Power and going, this is not the Lord of the Rings I remember. Because it's not. Strategy games, RPGs, action games, simulation games. Hell, I would love a kingdom simulator set in Lord of the Rings. They could rent it out. Like, I guarantee you, Total War would die to get access to the Lord of the Rings franchise. It absolutely would. It would then produce a product that would be inherently and automatically inferior to the mod that I'm currently streaming, incidentally. But hey, it would still be something, wouldn't it? It'd be something. Not to mention the amount of movie tie-in rights you could have here. TV series, shows, actual movies. So long as Embracer Group remains a little bit realistic and pitches this at the correct price point, because this is the clue here, right? Too many of these companies are pouring too much money into products that probably aren't going to be what they once were. Like a company like Relic, for example, is going to need to understand that they cannot produce Company of Heroes 1 anymore because they've already produced Company of Heroes 1. Their revolutionary video game is already flown. They're unlikely to be able to replicate that. What their best bet now probably is to focus more on polishing something for an appropriate scale market with an appropriate scale people, right? You can't make COH1 anymore. You can't make the revolution of RTS. But you can make a COH3, which is a serviceable strategy game, in my opinion. I think it's decent enough for what it is. But you need to pitch expectations appropriately as well, with an appropriate staff. And considering the amount of work they sorta kinda pseudo didn't get done on COH3, I'm expecting that they've got some bloat on hand. I mean, the fact that they needed to patch in a surrender option like, what, a year after release? Indicates that their priorities may have been somewhat messed up. The entire industry is going to need to scale back, and I hope they'll manage. Because, again, Relic, Creative Assembly, I can't help but hope that these companies will be able to recover, no matter how often they've hurt me in the past. Blind naivete, protect Arch from harsh reality. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.